Welcome to the presentation on evolving from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, to post-traumatic growth, PTG. I'm Ofer Zur, PhD, a licensed psychologist, ethicist, instructor, expert witness in court, author of 5 books and hundreds of articles, most importantly, an anthropologically critical thinker. I have a long list of my own severe traumas throughout my life. Today I'll refer only to 4 of them. The entire list is in my bio on my website at drzur.com. Post-traumatic growth is a theory that explains a certain kind of transformation following trauma. It was developed by psychologists Tedeschi and Calhoun in the 90s. It holds that people who endure psychological struggle or trauma following adversity can often see positive growth as a result of the trauma after the trauma. There has been a great deal of research and attention direct towards recovering from PTSD and trauma. However, psychology has been very, very slow to explore the possibility of post-traumatic growth, PTG. PTSD diagnosis translates to income, meaning income from insurance company, from mental health practitioner, MFTs, social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists. As a result, the focus of treatment remained almost exclusively on recovery from the trauma rather than growth from the trauma. In recent years, however, PTG, post-traumatic growth, has been attracting more and more attention away from the stop sign of only PTSD. I'm following one of my all-time heroes here, Dr. Viktor Frankl, who searched for meaning in the midst of the Nazi concentration camp in World War II. I also searched for meaning during my own war experience with all the intense trauma, injury, confusion, guilt, etc. I'm also in search for meaning in my many suffering experiences in my life, travel, incarceration, malaria, etc. Following are my reflection on 4 traumas out of many more that I have encountered in my 70 plus years on this planet. And these traumas that I have kind of taught me a lot and really have reshaped my life. In my own post-traumatic growth injury journeys, I'll talk about this 4. When I was 10-year-old, a soldier threw a phosphorus grenade. Instead, he thought it was a smoke grenade, and he just wanted to have fun on Halloween in a huge square in Israel. And I was like inflamed, 3rd, 4th degree burn on my legs, here in my head. I was just on fire. And I spent a month in the hospital. And it was interesting that with all the pain that was there and the multiple surgeries, I remember that after a week or 2, I had just fun on the wheelchair, and I learned how to do wheelchair just on 2 wheels and just go through the hospital corridors and lobbies and stuff. And it was like, it was in an interesting way, gave me life and oomph. Go 10 years later to age 20, I'm serving in Gaza, which is now, everybody knows, in the news. And I was with 8 of my soldiers. I was a lieutenant and a paratrooper in the Israeli army. And we went through Jabalia, one of the most horrendous refugee camps in Gaza that we hear a lot in the news. I found myself surrounded by hundreds of kids between ages 12 and 18, and they were closing on me. And I put my soldiers with our guns facing them. I try to call for the rescue, but it will take them a while to get to me. And the children were throwing rocks and closing on us. So I left my body and I told myself, you have two fucked up choices. Sorry for the language. You're either going to shoot into 10, 12, 14 years old who closing on you. This is the children from the refugee camp, Palestinians, Gazans. Or I tell myself, they're going to be eaten alive. You're going to be dead. And as I was watching the whole thing from above, I told myself, these two choices are truly fucked up and you have to leave the country. Again, now 20 years old. It took me another 10 years old to leave the country. But this was my post-traumatic resolution. The rescue came in the last minute, probably I would say 15 seconds before I had to order fire on these young, innocent kids who were just protecting their territories. So it was trauma, but it also changed my life for the good. And 10 years later, at 30, I moved to the United States because I carry this resolution from age 20. I went in and out of the country to Africa and other places, but this is when I had this out-of-body experience, which I call post-traumatic growth journey for me. The third one that I'll quickly describe to you, I was arrested in Africa for a place that I shouldn't have been, where there was no Israeli kind of any kind of connection between the two countries, but I wanted to see some disappearing tribe or disappearing culture, and so I got another passport and got arrested, and they threatened to execute me, the police of this country, and I got hysterically blind. That means somebody in the prison had to hold my hand to walk me around as I hear at night the tortures, the screaming of the tortures, and knows that I am next. And the blindness somehow protected me in some regard. I took responsibility for going to the place where I was not welcome. And it stayed with me. It said, do you want to go to a place where you may be executed, which I have carried for the rest of now more than 50 years later. I'm still thinking about it. And the third kind of post-traumatic growth that I would like to share with you right now is a 2023-2024 crisis in Israel, in Gaza, knowing that I left Israel because of what happened. So I started with worried and anger and fear to my family, to my friends in Israel, and shifted to remind myself. It took me a few weeks to move away from sleepless nights to how it affirmed me following my conviction of justice and leaving Israel for more reasons. So it's kind of was fear, almost hysterical and non-sleep of what happened in Israel, to move right now to that I followed my conviction of what's fair and what's just, and I left Israel for more reasons. This is kind of, I have more examples of that, but this is kind of how I move from a place of trauma to a place of growth. For me, the biggest example of this transition is Nelson Mandela. He was 27 years in prison in South Africa. There were tortures, there was isolation, there was starvation. There was unheard of 27 years in prison. And when he became the prime minister of South Africa, he had no resentment of the people who tortured him. He did not seek any revenge of his torturers. He accepted it and moved on in a most incredible way. For me, he symbolizes the post-traumatic growth. I'm sure that in your life you have people that suffer incredible traumas, abuse, car accident, war injuries, whatever it is, and thrive after they dealt with the trauma. So this is what we are talking today about post-traumatic growth. My exploration and experiences have helped me to grow and to find deeper meaning in my life as a result, not in spite of my traumatic event. So going through the trauma and processing them in a certain way helped me to develop resilience, to find meaning in my life, to become reflective and getting clarity of what I believe right from wrong. And in short, this trauma were life-changing, and I emerged from each one of them stronger, clearer, and in my book, more of a moral person. So therapy with traumatized people, we now realize, is about more than just surviving and recovering from the trauma. And there's 5 categories of growth that occur over time. 1, survivor of trauma recognize and embrace the new opportunity, the life-changing. So we really emphasizing the post-traumatic growth. 2, they cultivate inner strength through the knowledge that they have overcome tremendous hardship, whether it's Mandala or me or you, the listener. Then we gain, number 3, we gain deeper appreciation for our lives. That we are still alive, even though we may have been killed or wounded terribly in the trauma, or we were wounded and we still recover. And then 4, the relationship to religion and spirituality change. For me, it really put me into the meditation practice, into yoga practice, and appreciation of spirituality. For many other people, it's kind of getting closer to God and become part of a religious organization, whether it's a church, mosque, or synagogue. And the 5th one is we forge stronger relationship with loved one around us. So whether they're a victim or not, it's easier to connect with people who were victims like us, and we share the suffering, and we also share the post-traumatic growth, hopefully. How is post-traumatic growth different than resilience? This is kind of a question that I get quite a bit. So post-traumatic growth goes above and beyond resilience, and above and beyond surviving. It represents a capacity to reflect, grow, and truly shift one perspective of oneself and the world around us. Surviving a grueling battle with illness, for example, that so many of us had, especially as we get to my age, may lead someone to quit their job sometimes, to devote their life to fight against the diseases. So you had cancer and now you help other people with cancer. Or other people who face a crisis, a life-threatening event or disease like you, and you can help them grow. So resilience is still within surviving, and the growth is going above and beyond resilience and surviving. So the people who go beyond that, it's a new appreciation of life that we have, a new commitment to what is our values and connection to the world, to the animal, and of course to loved one. Your resiliency is a personal ability to bounce back. PTG is about evolving to a personal growth beyond survival, beyond showing our resilient. So PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, is definitely can be legitimate, can be triggered, and can really throw it into pathology. But then we need to really sometimes separate Like after 9/11, the people in New York were frightened for good reason. This is because when this tower collapsed, and they could have been there or could be around it. But then when people in LA report post-traumatic stress disorder, I would have asked them, how were you triggered to get into hysteria of what happened 3,000 miles away? So they were activated. So they don't have post-traumatic stress disorder, but they were activated where they're over the world or whatever, all over America, when people got triggered away from New York. So we honor it, but they were not traumatized, they got activated. And then it's a time to explore what is a source of the activation, but not to confuse it with the actual trauma. And there wasn't a good job here in the media or among therapists to differentiate between the two. Post-traumatic growth refers to what can happen when somebody who is in difficulty bouncing back experiences a traumatic event or challenge. It's sometimes challenging our core belief. Like for me, I had to leave Israel, to live where my parents who escaped from the Nazi Germany, to come to Israel and to go through the struggle to go to another country. So it's a different, ultimately we find a new sense of meaning and personal growth as we move beyond the PTSD. And then talking to people about my many traumatic experiences and my relationship to that, I have to ask myself, was I born with more resilient perhaps than other people? Was the idea that I grew up in a country where war was very early on, and a phosphorus grenade hit me at age 10. So we need to be sensitive to the level of resiliency of people. Less resilient people, on the other hand, may go through more distress or confusion when they try to understand why this terrible thing happened to them and what it means for their worldview. So I don't take it for granted that everybody is the same. Some people are more vulnerable than others. I've worked with women who have been abused but came out of it in a most powerful way to help other women in their situation. On the other hand, some other women got really crushed, and it's understandable as well. So some traditional therapy for trauma patient is not very effective in the long run because it just focus on survival rather than thriving. So giving people the short fix solution to help them resume daily function is just a start. Yes, after trauma, we need to help our client to go back to work if that's what they want, to be able to sleep somewhat okay. But for me, this presentation is an invitation to go beyond surviving, beyond going back to how functioning we were before. So the trauma is transformative for us. So we have got to attend to people experience traumatic experience of life in a new way and to look at the meaningful way that the trauma may have transpired us or trigger us or inspired us. So trauma is transformed into something that usually doesn't happen to people who were not traumatized. So it's kind of an interesting that you go into a car accident and you feel guilty about surviving it, and then you look at where were you in the car accident, how did you get there, who drank, etc., etc., etc. So, and what does it mean for you about your relationship to life or relationship to the people who you lost in the drunk driving accident? So kind of reflective about what does it mean in a big picture. And what a surprising and most important fact on post-traumatic growth is that even guilt or shame can have a positive adaptive qualities. So if I felt guilty to where I was in Africa, where I got hysterically blind, I took full responsibility for that. It's the same thing when I got wounded in a war. When the bullet hit me and I collapsed, I told myself in the battlefield, I was 73, you shouldn't have gone to war. On the spot, I told myself, you shouldn't have gone to war, because I didn't believe the 73 war was necessary, was just, etc., etc. So on the spot, in some regard, I felt the guilt of wanting to be a soldier and paratrooper and lieutenant and all the stuff that you grow up often in Israel, less so now in recent years. So my post-traumatic growth of being hard on myself and guilty and shame for my wanting to go to war that kind of dawned on me as I collapsed when my calf got blown up, it was actually positive and adaptive. So guilt and shame are not necessarily bad responses, initial responses to trauma. The search for meaning may cause a short-term deterioration in functioning, as I just said, but finding meaning is critical to enabling the post-traumatic growth. Many people report of positive outcome resulting from the trauma, the way you heard me talking about my own trauma, and credit the traumatic event with a significant improvement in their life. Again, whether you get cancer and after cancer you say, life is precious and I may need to change my job. So the post-traumatic model not only reduce pathology ultimately, but strengthen our clients, if you are a therapist, resilient to future traumatic events. So it creates resilience and a greater appreciation of life. And it crafts new meaning and experience deeper. We experience life deeper, more fulfilling life and more fulfilling relationship if we pay attention. In conclusion, when you or those dear to you or your clients, if you're a therapist, experience trauma, besides surviving it and become so-called functional again, this is a ferocious invitation to explore the message that was sent your way via the traumatic experiences. What there is for me to listen. How do I need to change? What I'm being called for by this traumatic experience that I survived. So, thank you for listening. I hope this YouTube recording is helping you and others to choose how to go forward from trauma that all of us experience some kind of trauma. Many more YouTubes and hundreds of free articles and resources are available on my website for free at www.drzur.com, www.drzur.com. Thank you and be well.